Hey guys, back here again. It's summer school. We're talking Georgia Tech. That means I'm talking to Rod Mackenzie of Go Jackets 24/7. Rod, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. I'll see you again coming up at ACC Media Days. This will presumably air before then. So Georgia Tech, makes an in-season coaching change and ends up going with the interim coach, promoting him to the full-time coach. We know they talked to a couple other coaches along the way, but Brent Key gets the job. What are your overall impressions so far of Brent Key and your impressions of the staff that he's been able to assemble?
Well, I think the most important thing as far as Tech fans are concerned about Brent Key is that he is a Georgia Tech grad, so he has a lot to work for here because he knows what Georgia Tech's all about. Uh, maybe has a little more, puts a little more energy into things because he is that Georgia Tech grad. But the most impressive thing to me was the way he went about his business. Uh, it would have been easy to bring a lot of the assistant coaches back, but he flushed just about the whole staff from recruiting specialists, offense and defense analysts, that type of thing, uh, director of operations. The only two coaches that he retained were Chris Winkie at quarterback, and he's also going to be working with the game plan for the offense. And of course, Andrew Thackeray brings him back, and he brings back Travaris Tillman, and in another capacity, he brings back Marco Coleman, who was there previously, left to go to Michigan State. He was a defensive end coach before he left. Now he's in charge of the entire line. But the the coaches that I've talked to have been impressive. They've done a great job on the recruiting trail. I mean, they've brought in over 30 official visitors over these first 3 weeks, gotten a lot of commitments. So uh, these are guys that have been there before. And he went and looked for three different categories. He looked for somebody that has a lot of relationships in high school, and that was Josh Crawford, the receiver coach. He got Kevin Shear from the pros, who was with the New York Giants, and then of course the other guys have a lot of college experience. So he put together a great staff, and the his main thing right now is to give the ownership of the program to the players, and have them run the program and have them more involved in how things are working.
Let's talk offense for a little bit. Last year, outside the top 100 in most of the opponent adjusted categories, that they do lose quarterback Jeff Sims to the transfer portal. Didn't have a great career at Georgia Tech. Obviously, maybe a change of scenery could do him well. Maybe also well for the program. But I saw they brought in Haynes King out of Texas A&M, who was a one-time starter for the Aggies before Connor Wegman took over later in the season. Rod, are you presuming that Haynes King is going to be the starter? And if so, how do you think he'll do?
You know, the one thing we didn't get to see was uh, get to see the players in practice. We only got to see them in the spring game, so uh, your outlook on how they played can be a little jaded. But I thought both Haynes King and Zach Pyron uh, were pretty much even. Zach Pyron getting the experience at the end of the year when Sims went down with the injury. Uh, he's a kid that the players like. So, your quarterback, you're looking for a leader, somebody they can rally around. So, I think right now Zach Pyron probably has the edge going into the preseason practice. But the main thing that Key has done with his quarterbacks is he wants quarterbacks that have the same athletic qualities. So if one of them goes down, he doesn't have to change his offense like they did last year. They had to change the way they ran their offense two or three times with all the injuries they had. So, and waiting in the wings, you also have your third quarterback, Zach Gibson, who, was a starter at Akron. So you have three guys with starting experience, and that bodes well for the offense and what Buster Faulkner wants to do.
Buster Faulkner coming over from Georgia, of course. They do lose a number of skill position players and have hit the portal fairly heavily at the skill position. So Nate McCollum is off to what I think North Carolina, is it? Malachi
That's
Carter
correct.
is gone. EJ Jenkins is gone. Hassan Hall, the running back, is gone. But they bring in. I'm not even going to list them all. I'll just ask you, like, of these skill position guys that took a transfer, I think they took 7 or 8 transfer portal guys at the skill positions. Who do you think are the most important, the guys that are going to really make the impact for them?
Well, I think the first guy you got to look at if he stays healthy is Blaylock coming over from Georgia. I mean, he had some pretty good games over there, and of course he and Faulkner know each other. They know what Faulkner's looking for playmakers, and Blaylock is definitely a playmaker. Then you have a guy like Christian Leary, who, when you look at Alabama's receivers, they're deeper than deep, and he was one of those guys, and unfortunately, he wasn't one of the top 2 or 3, so he didn't get to play that much. But he had a great spring. He's really moved up the charts, and so, along with the return of Malik Rutherford, you have 3 guys that quite arguably could be better than the group that they had last year.
That would be pretty awesome for them to be even better than they were last year. I thought McCollum had some real juice. The rest of the guys were okay, I guess, right? Just not like big time difference makers. O-line though returns quite a bit, I guess, right? I mean, like they lose Pierce Quick and one of their guards, but that should be a unit that could improve. Obviously, Brent Key, a long time got his coach O-line, and I think tight end at times.
Yeah, that's been I think the one of the main positions that's held Georgia Tech back in their progress since they switched over from the Paul Johnson offense. They had to completely redo the offensive line. Their first recruiting class, they didn't have one single offensive line commit. So, they were trying to patch things up with bringing in a transfer one year, another transfer the next year. So the 5 that trotted out on the field against Georgia in the last game will be the 5 that'll start this year. So consistency, continuity is a big thing. And you have Weston Franklin, a third-year player who will be his second year as a starting center. And you have a guy like Williams who has started at tackle for 3 years, and he'll be moving inside the guard this year. So, you have a big 6'5", 300+ pound guard. That's pretty good. That bodes well. And then your 2 starting tackles the last game were both freshmen last year. So there's a lot of good young talent coming back, and now they're trying to fill the pipeline, build some good depth there. And now that is happening, I think that's the Georgia Tech program can maybe move forward a little faster than they had been over the last 3 or 4 years.
If you look at this, their schedule: Louisville, South Carolina State, at Ole Miss, at Wake, Bowling Green, at Miami, Boston College, UNC, at UVA, at Clemson, Cuse, and Georgia. There's really only 2 programs there that I think for sure scare you from a defensive line standpoint, right? Clemson and Georgia. Everybody else, if you play to a certain level, you at least go into the game thinking you can handle their front. Louisville lost an absolute ton to the NFL draft along that defensive front. North Carolina is theoretically good, but at the same time, we're kind of still waiting for them to play a lick of defense under Mac Brown. So, I guess we will see if they will. Rod, I'll ask you this: like, do you think this, in your mind, when you're kind of thinking about this year's team, is this offense definitively better than last year?
I think it should be. I mean, they were counting on Jeff Sims. That didn't happen. There was some little bit of controversy between, how injured was he? Did they wanted him to play? He didn't. His parents didn't want him to play. There was just a lot of things going on with the quarterback position, so they never really got rolling. But I feel really good about Winky and Faulkner, 2 guys that have proven themselves. And just watching some of the things they did in the spring game, I said, whoa, this is something we haven't seen before. And Faulkner, he always talks about looking for playmakers. He doesn't care what position they play. He'll find ways to get the ball to them. You have guys that can line up in the slot. He can move them outside. He can move them into the backfield, put them in motion. There's a lot of different things they're doing differently now. with the offense. And the last position they need to get rolling is the tight end position, and that's a position that Faulkner likes to use. As far as more so with maybe as a receiver than a blocker in the offense, and they just haven't had that much success in recruiting with the tight end. So it's going to be up to a couple of seniors, like Dylan Leonard. You have the transfer from Georgia and Brent Key coming in, and so we'll see what happens there. But I think that when we finished the regular season, we thought, wow, it's going to be tough next year in offense too. But that has sort of, the worm has turned a little there, and thanks to the transfer portal, things are looking a lot better there.
Let's switch to the defensive side of the football. That was pretty clearly the better side of the football in last year's team. This year, though, there are some notable losses. Keon White, I thought, was an excellent player for Georgia Tech at 11.5 tackles for loss. They lose Ely and Thomas, who had 8.5 and 10.5 tackles for loss, respectively. That's like 30 tackles for loss spread across 3 guys. That is kind of on the upper side of production to lose, and they lose Zamari Walton at corner as well, who transferred to Ole Miss. I think it was
Ole Miss, yeah.
I need to put that on my sheet, like where these guys actually transferred out to. I think there's there's some signal to that, but other than that, they return a lot of names. Are the names any good? I guess is I'm not trying to be mean, condescending with the question, but like the dudes who stood out on the stat sheet for the most part are gone. So like, how are the guys coming back any good?
Yeah, I think the first player you have to talk about is Lamiles Brooks at safety, and he was one of the it was his first year as a starter. He had overcome injuries finally. He had a great season, and I think some of the magazines, the preseason magazines, are picking him for all ACC. And then you had, a couple of freshmen came in and played as true freshmen, and Clayton Powell-Lee, Rodney Shelley, and I think that they got a big plus when Jalen King, who started the beginning of the year at safety, came back. So what they've done, they've moved him back into the back of the secondary, and I think you might see somebody like either Clayton Powell-Lee or Lamiles Brooks move up closer to the line of scrimmage, like maybe put them in at the nickel position. So you have a guy that has some speed, a guy that can cover receivers out of the backfield or tight ends coming across the middle, that type of thing. So I think that's a big plus. But like you said, when you lose Charlie Thomas and Ace Ely at linebacker, one of the better combinations, you have some big shoes to fill. And they brought in, Andre White from Texas A&M, and they brought in Braylon Oliver from who's a starter at Minnesota. He's from the Atlanta area. He came back home, but at the end of the spring, they gave out awards, and Trinelius Tatum, who was completing his second season, was named the top linebacker in the spring. So he's a guy to watch. So I'm not saying they're going to be like those two that left, but I think you have to feel fairly good about the guys that they're plugging in there to take their place. And you talked about Zamari Walton. He's the only secondary starter that is not back this year. And you look over at Ole Miss and you see three former Tech players that somehow ended up over there. Walton announces one week that he's coming back for his COVID year, and the next week he's off to Ole Miss. So we all know how those things are working right now.
Funny how that works, isn't it? Special teams wise, the one number that stands out to me, and if I'm recalling correctly, so Georgia Tech's punt efficiency was terrible, but didn't they get a bunch of punts blocked early in the year? I'm trying to, were they actually bad at punting, or were they just bad at like not getting them off?
I think it was a combination. They had a freshman, and they just tried to, this is just my opinion, I feel like they tried to do too much with this freshman punter. We want you to kick it over towards the left sideline. We want you to kick it over towards the right sideline. And the kid had too much to think about. in my mind. So instead of just saying, hey, go back there, punt the ball, and let our cover guys take care of business, they didn't do that. And he looked a lot better in the spring. They brought in Ricky Brumfield, who at one time was at Virginia. He's the new special teams coordinator, which they didn't have before. They, doled it out to different coaches on the staff to take care of the different phases of special teams. But that's one area that definitely has to improve. And the kid has a strong leg. I mean, he would get off a 50-yarder, and then they would ask him to do something special, and it would go 30, 35 yards. So they need him to be able to turn the field on a more consistent basis than they did last year. That's for sure.
Rod, when you look at this football team, where's the spot that you feel okay about the starters, but the drop off to the backups is just substantial, and you're just like, okay, these backups are not, they really can't be playing them, right? Got to stay healthy at this spot because the backups just aren't ready to make a difference.
Yeah, I go right back to the offensive line. They're most of the backups are freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores. So you don't want to have any injuries on the offensive line. You want to be able to trot that same 5 guys out there on a consistent basis and be able to protect your quarterback, because you can't put everything on Sims because he was running for his life a lot. The first couple of years with that offensive line. So if you can get a guy like Pyron or Haynes King time to throw the ball, they have strong arms, they're accurate. So that's the one area that I'm sort of worried about. I think they've built the depth back up at receiver position. They have 4 scholarship backs, running backs. Dante Smith is back. He carried the load, the last half of the season at running back, him and Hall both. So, losing Hall was big, but they went back to Louisville and brought in another running back from Louisville. So, and then they have a freshman, Evan Dickens from IMG Academy, who really caught everybody's eye in the spring game, and he really looked good. So that's another kid that can maybe pick up the slack, from the loss of Hassan Hall.
Rod, really enjoyed it. I'll see you at ACC Media Days coming up, and thanks for the time. Everybody needs to go check out Go Jackets.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.